West of Rock Creek Hollow, I rode along the northern edge of Wyoming's Red Desert, a high elevation basin known for long winters, hot, dry summers, and persistent winds. The climate is so harsh, no plant can grow more than a foot tall, bone sized sagebrush as far as the eye could see, the steppes of central Wyoming. At 8 a.m., the wind was already blowing 15 miles per hour. Sand, rock, sagebrush, and greasewood blanketed a rolling terrain veined with gullies extending to the horizon in every direction. And that was just the first mile. Across the divide, I came to Willow Creek. I was now on the Hellier Ranch, which I had received permission to cross. The creek wasn't bridged, but I'd forded 3 others the day before, so no problem, or so I thought. This section of the creek was in an enclosed area with cattle. The cows had created a labyrinth of 3-foot-tall mounds in the wet land, accented by cow poop. To get to the creek, I had to unhook my trailer, carry it and my bike separately through the maze to the edge of the creek, reattach the trailer, then pedal across. Once across, I had to unhook the trailer again and carry everything past another besmirched maze of cow mounds and hook it all up again. Not too bad, except that 30 feet later, I came to another branch of the creek to cross. Same routine. Only there was a third branch, deeper, wider, and muddier than the previous 2. The little herd of cattle had just crossed to get away from me, leaving who knew what in the murky water. The only way across was to take my shoes off and carry everything, sinking calf-deep in mud, knee-deep in brown water, and then through yet another poopy maze of cow tracks on the other side. It could have been worse, I suppose. Overland immigrants who ran out of water crossing dry stretches on the prairie actually drank out of buffalo wallows. But this was as close as I wanted to get to reliving that particular feature of the overland immigrant experience. The ride from there to Burnt Ranch was straightforward, if strenuous. Hills and valleys, soft sand, sharp rocks, prickly pear, and all the time, wind, sometimes steady, sometimes gusting, always against me. In moments when I was thinking how difficult it was on a bike, I imagined how much more difficult it would have been for the overland immigrants, walking in the heat while whacking oxen, or for the Mormon handcart immigrants, starving and huddled against the bitter cold. I also thought about being a Pony Express rider on this stretch, and what a dreary route this would be as your back and forth run, especially in winter. Eventually, I descended off the plain toward the 9th and final crossing of the Sweetwater River. Settlements in this area were deliberately set on fire at least 3 times in the mid-1800s. Appropriately, this area is known as Burnt Ranch. I rode all over trying to find a bridge I thought my map showed crossing the Sweetwater. As it turned out, the map I was following may have shown a ford, but not a bridge. Finally, I recalled the owner telling me that the bridge was south of his ranch buildings, and after nearly an hour of wandering, I found it. But not before coming across a couple of historical monuments, which was nice, and also soaking my feet in another stream crossing, which wasn't so good. Back on the plain from the river bottom, I was once again riding into the full force of the wind. Nothing to do but to put my head down and do it. I was headed to South Pass, the Panama Canal of the Immigrant Trail, the place where the trail crossed Uncle Sam's backbone, the Continental Divide. I passed between twin mounds, which helped guide immigrants over the pass. Finally, I reached South Pass itself. It had taken me a month to ride this far. It took the prairie schooner immigrants twice that long. For them, South Pass only marked the halfway point of their overland journey. Wyoming archaeologist Todd Gunther, who for 17 years led educational outfitting expeditions at Burnt Ranch, has called this area the nexus of Western expansion and the gateway to the continent that shaped the American future. South Pass is a primary topographic feature that defined the Oregon, California, Mormon Pioneer, and Pony Express trails. They all led to and away from this point, because it was the only pass through the Rocky Mountains wagons could traverse between Marias Pass, near the Canadian border, and Guadalupe Pass, just above Mexico. The pass itself is anticlimactic. It's a 20-mile wide saddle, not a narrow gap. Many immigrants didn't even know they'd crossed it until they reached Pacific Springs, a few miles further, and noticed Pacific Creek flowing west instead of east. Eventually, the Pony Express bikepacking route met Highway 28, which followed to an area marked by a monument to the parting of the ways. Only this place is actually the false parting of the ways. The real split was some miles further west. It marks the place where the sublet cutoff left the main trail, offering a shortcut for immigrants that saved about 46 miles in 2.5 days' travel, but only by crossing a waterless desert. The bikepacking route left the highway at the false parting, so in a sense, I found myself at a personal parting of the ways. I could leave the highway and continue over dirt roads, or I could continue on pavement. Both roads led to Farson, my destination for the night. The bikepacking route map noted that the trail had areas of deep sand and to expect slow going. I had to wonder, wasn't that deep sand I had just ridden through? If there were no notations on that section, how much worse would the next section be? That could easily add another couple of hours to my ride. Honestly, I don't think I had it in me. I kept to the highway. From the false parting of the ways to Farson, Wyoming, a little over 20 miles, I engaged in a 3-hour grudge match with the wind. By the time I limped into Farson, I'd been on the bike 8 hours. I was beat. The only motel in town was permanently closed, but there was free primitive camping behind the Mercantile. I felt a huge wave of relief. No matter how primitive the camping was, it meant no more riding that day. The Farson Mercantile is known as the home of the Big Cone. I ordered the 4-scooper, and I swear it was at least a quart of ice cream. Everyone in the shop who saw me laughed. Life had turned from bleak to plush in the space of an hour. Farson didn't become my new favorite town, but it was a lifesaver that afternoon. Farson grew up near the confluence of Little Sandy Creek and the Big Sandy River. It was a natural crossroad and has a number of historical monuments. There was one for the Big Sandy Pony Express station. Another nearby celebrated the brave men who rode the Pony Express, and yet a third commemorated the meeting of the first east and westbound Pony Express riders. It's believed they passed one another somewhere between Farson and the Green River. There is a large interpretive sign noting the history and importance of the crossing. Another marked an 1847 meeting between legendary mountain man Jim Bridger and Brigham Young, who was leading the first contingent of Latter-day Saints to Salt Lake. Bridger had trapped and scouted throughout the West for more than 20 years. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of the land and spent the evening telling Young what he knew about the Great Salt Lake Valley. I got an early start the next morning. I wanted to make Granger, Wyoming, about 55 miles away, before the heat set in and the winds kicked up. Riding Highway 28, which follows the Big Sandy River, I stopped by a pullout marking Simpson's Hollow. It was here that Mormons won a war against the United States without firing a shot. In May 1857, President Buchanan decided Mormon hostility toward territorial officials evidenced a rebelliousness that threatened to weaken the Union. He sent out the Utah expedition to install and to protect a new Utah territorial governor in place of Brigham Young. The expedition's march across the plains was poorly organized. Troops and supplies traveled at different speeds, and as a result, supply caravans found themselves without military escort. In the area around Simpson's Hollow, mounted Mormons surrounded supply caravans, and after allowing the bullwhackers to save their personal belongings, burned the wagons and took the animals. Altogether, the Army lost 3 months' worth of provisions for the expedition. Faced with this loss, the troops settled in for the winter near the ruins of Fort Bridger, which the Mormons had burnt down to deny the Army shelter. By the following spring, President Buchanan had sent a secret envoy to negotiate peace with the Mormons. When Colonel Albert Sidney Johnson finally led his army through Salt Lake City in June 1858, the troops marched through an empty, silent city. About halfway into my ride, I came to Sietskadee National Wildlife Refuge, which borders the Green River. The name comes from Crow Indians who called the river Sietskadee-Agi, Prairie Chicken River. In immigrant days, crossing the Green River was dangerous, but unavoidable. In 1843, the mountain men built a ferry, which the Mormons bought in 1850. Today it's known as the Lombard Ferry. There is a replica that has actually been used to ferry wagons across the river. After crossing the Green, I left the highway and Green River to keep southwest toward Granger. I followed a 2-track trail over sand and gravel the rest of the ride. The Green River Valley between Farson and Granger is part of the Green River Basin, which, in the words of geologist Keith Heyer-Medall, redefines monotony. From the immigrant area to the present, the land has been described as scabby, bone-dry, and with short buttes that looked like flat-top warps on a sagebrush skin. The descriptions are apt. For miles, a virtually featureless landscape of sagebrush and greasewood were all I could see in every direction. The air warmed to the low 90s, and the wind rose to about 10 miles per hour. But after the day before, the weather felt moderate. In fact, the ride turned out to be pleasant. I found the emptiness peaceful. So long as my bike rolled along and the wind didn't fight me too much, I was happy to be riding through the desert. At length, I followed Black's Fork into Granger, Wyoming. Granger sits at the confluence of Black's Fork and Ham's Fork. Like Farson, it is a natural crossroad. The 1834 fur trappers' rendezvous took place in this area. The Transcontinental Railroad was built through here in the 1860s and Lincoln Highway in the 1910s. Today, Interstate 80 lies about 5 miles south. The ruins of an old stage station stand in an undeveloped lot. The Hams Fork Pony Express station stood about a half-mile away, south of Black's Fork. The town allowed camping in its park, but the 4th of July fireworks are going to be held that evening, a day early, so I couldn't stay there. Antelope Crossing Pub, a closed restaurant in Granger, still operated as a caterer. I'd been in touch with Jessica, who owns the pub, with her husband Ed, and she was willing to prepare vegetarian meals for me. As it turned out, Jessica and Ed offered to let me stay in the pub for the night if I wanted. By that point, nothing about trying to find a camping spot on BLM land appealed to me. Sleeping arrangements made, I settled in and spent the rest of the afternoon talking to Jessica while she cooked. We had a pleasant, wandering conversation about nothing in particular. Making Granger meant I had crossed the most remote sections of the trail east of Salt Lake. Though I still had about 200 miles to ride, there would be places to stay and reprovision every night. For the first time since St. Joseph, I knew I could finish the ride.